Dear Jack, I am not sure why I am writing this to you instead of just texting it, or saying it on the phone, or saying it in front of you. But I feel like you are someone who writes letters, and I know I am, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm also doing this because I have often wondered if the shortcomings in our communication to each other, think, quote, I don't understand what you want, were somewhat of an epistemological matter. That it was not a lack of care or moral diligence which had led us here, but rather lack of knowledge which could be breached if the tools fit to transmit this knowledge were finally found. There is so much I have to say. I know this might raise an eyebrow or drag a sigh out because I have said so much already. In fact, you have made it clear to me that I am pushing the limit of my welcome into your time. That the day after, in June, we spoke for hours, and so why was I not done yet, and why did you have to keep dealing with it, and what did I want, and what do I want? Although there is always another angle I feel I've yet to verbalize, i.e. can't shut the fuck up to save my life, I hope getting at least part of what I want to share with you in a form of writing which you can revisit might help me feel I have done the best I could until I could no longer do it. I want to know that throughout this, I will have given as much as I could possibly make it available, insight into how I feel, what I want. I wish I was as transparent to you as you have claimed me to be in the past. Think, quote, I can always see what's going through your mind, how now you're confused, and now you're smiling, and now you're trying not to giggle, and now you're giggling. And when I'm nervous, I bite my bottom lip, or I dig my fingers into my arm, or I shake my hands like I'm drying something off of them that isn't quite there. And when you get really close to me, the red onion smell you say I have to you and you only dissipates. And when I don't want to have sex with someone, really don't, I tell them to stop, or that I don't want to do that, or I push their hand away, or I bury my face into a pillow, or I tense my arms around me, or I squeeze my legs shut, or I cry, or I do all of these things. Regardless of what such a statement inspires in you, I want you to understand that since you raped me, I have not felt alive. Not properly. The days have blended into some gray elongation with no clear start end with depth for out, something chewed up, regurgitated, and spat. Moving through the world has become akin to being a child moving their untouched food from one corner of their plate to another, from that corner to the previous one, still hoping their mother will not notice they have no desire or intent to eat anything. It is like being a child who keeps trying to wake a dead person up. It is how I have been trying to get myself out of the same bedroom for 2 months now, subconsciously begging all of those around me to come get me out of it, believing you were perhaps the only one who could, yet being faced with the fact that no one can, that no one will, that one could have in the moment but did not care to. Since June, I have not had a normal night's sleep, or a normal appetite, or a day where I have felt like things could genuinely turn around. When I try to have sex, I feel like I'm dying, or I cry and shut down or bleed or do all of the above, and all of the above gradually compounds the feeling that I have, in truth, nothing of note to contribute to the world. I know you pointed it out when I first told you that some of these abnormalities were abnormalities before, and they were, but it was getting better, and more than anything, the harm that had been done by a bad guy, who you and I could conjointly identify as a bad guy and place ourselves in opposition to. Through this, you had demonstrated to me the ability to recognize right from wrong, to stop yourself, to be honest and caring, and although this should make your breach of these practices, of praxis even, more forgivable or less grave, it is further evidence of the non-epistemological dimension of what was done, of the fact that you could have not done it, knowing the harm it would cause me, and chose to do it still, knowingly chose. This is in large part why I originally wanted to have these conversations with you on a frequent basis, even if they were redundant, especially if they were redundant, because I knew there had been care inferred, foretold, and perhaps even shown at times, and wanted as such to believe that through continued exchange you could see the harm that had been caused play out in real time, and mutate, and metastasize, and through this understand what you had perhaps not understood then, the epistemological barrier which was the last dam holding intent from flooding into your hands that night, one which could, through the process of our exchanges, be mediated and reformed to align with the desire to do well you were telling me you have had, continue to have. Because either you had not understood that I did not want what happened, in which case there was an acute need for you to understand how to identify clear signs of this in other people. Think, quote, stop, I don't want to do that, crying, shutting down, etc. Or, what I firmly believe to be the only reasonable analysis, you had understood and ignored these signs, perhaps not out of desire to cause harm, but rather to dismiss its infliction, say for the sake of desire itself, of pleasure, of the sensation of higher control and power and knowledge over some woman, some girl, some know-it-all brat, sexually immature and overly stubborn and nagging and taunting and needing a push and begging for you to teach her something real, and maybe some damage too. Of course, it is evident now you have no interest in continuing the enterprise I have tried to pursue with these exchanges, and in them of my recurrent semi-foolish but well-meaning mentions of trainings, restorations, truths, etc. Perhaps you are frustrated by the whole of it, or bored, or both, driven by impatience, confusion, hatred, fear, perhaps all of these and others. I wish you would tell me. I felt for the past 2 months that, if nothing else, you were at least in that room with me, perhaps lacking understanding, perhaps clumsy with the way you were approaching it in our conversations, in your attempts to protect yourself at my expense, but somewhat, somehow, indisputably there. Still, it seems with time you have walked out of the version of you which is still inside of me, as I am still in the bed, and am left behind in it even though I am never able to claim autonomy, or ownership, or selfhood, which does not contain a piece of you forcibly pressed into its foundation. Time will help, I know that, but I also know it will never completely go away. How long, then, does this attempt keep on going? I don't know. I have, throughout this, tried to do what I could to take the road which drew things out as little as possible, antagonized us to the least possible degree, a road which was paved with silver linings and expressions of something honest and almost tender, but it seems this is not to your liking. I tried to mitigate your wishes that night to be forgiving and give you some of what you wanted, a kiss and not more, but of course this was not to your liking. It was never to your liking. It was never enough to be to your fucking liking, and so you played along to listening until it went against what you wanted to hear, and then went deaf pretending I was the one who had gone mute, and I gave you understanding and forgiveness and friendship, and you took all the things I asked you to not take, please not take, please not this, please stop, please Jack, stop, please, and then just crying, because there was nothing more I could say. Because what more could I say? This has not only hurt me as a person and as a friend, but as a reader, a writer, someone who felt through this a particular connection to you through craft and the principles underlying it. I believe that as a writer, one ought to have a particularly deep, diligent respect for other people, for words, and for narrative, a duty to be meticulous in caring towards the world, because the world is the source material, canvas, and recipient of craft in a way which reflects upon itself and upon this very process of nearing. In this, I believe writing differs from, say, music or dance or painting or photography, in that language has a fundamentally hermetic quality which allows it to exist only through a vicarious appeal to the senses rather than the bare senses themselves. Translatable only in all other languages, writing thus cannot rid itself of the by proxy dimension of its appeal reference to phenomenology. In this sense, it may be seen as furthest from the real than other arts, but also as perhaps so anchored in the real because of its complete dependency on the process of relation. My point here being is that if you call yourself a writer, you should have an utmost respect for language and narrative. What Derrida said, how this language both describes and forms the real, how this underscores and demands an understanding of creative and interpersonal license as separate, yet an irreducible duty of respect towards the tools and people which allow for condition one's craft. This means that a word is a Jenga piece of the real, that a word like stop in a context like that knights some foundation of a Maslow-like pyramid of articulation whose dismissal collapses it entirely. This means that you should recognize in each individual a potential for inner life which can be apprehended but not overwritten out of respect for language and character, if nothing else. That you recognize triteness in narrative, and as such triteness in raping a friend the day before she is set to go report what is likely another assault. And I don't know what to say to change things, to undo them. I don't know what I can tell you I want more than when I told you I don't want to do that because it still happened. I don't have anything to say which I feels matters because whatever it is drowned out by the tinnitus of your voice in my ear saying you feel so fucking good as you're in me to a degree which makes everything else seem pointless and makes me believe I will never feel as good to myself and certainly to anyone and certainly not to myself as the consumption of said self felt to you. As such, you have made me feel like I should not be alive. You have made me feel like the world does not want me around and would rather I not be in it, that everyone would be better off if I had never existed or at least took the hint at last and in some act not quite legitimate to claim abnegation, but at least collective relief, removed myself from a life-size party I was never invited to in the first place. You have made me feel like I have nothing to say that matters, never have, and especially never will. But if you did not want me in your bedroom that morning, if I was interrupting and unwanted and ruining the mood like you said I was, you should have left me alone, Jack. You should have told me to go wait in the corner with my back turned or get the fuck out. And when I was pushing your hand out of me and telling you I did not want to touch you or even look at you, that should have sealed the deal in my insufferable and undesired character, such that you should have left me alone. If anything, out of selfishness, I do not understand why you had to fuck it all up and drop the glassware if it was not slipping and throw me out with the recycling and the bathwater and the drying paint and throw out everything shared that was good and could have been good and kind and beautiful and caring in your life and mine's and our friendship, because I would have forgiven you for anything else, for anything, but you've put me in an impossible situation and smashed up these ideas of poetry and care into something ugly and unfixable, and we could have had it real good, Jack. There was room for the both of us to have it so good, so why did you have to do that? Why did you have to do that, Jack? I do not understand why you did, why you could, how you could. And Jack, when you raped me, it felt like I was dying. I know you might find this overly emphatic, but it is the only word that feels right. I mean it in a very existential sense, how I felt myself crack like a glass ball under the sole of a shoe and the fragments of it be expelled all over the room in a way I could not and cannot recuperate. I will not assume whether you can understand this experience, the complete death of the, quote, ego, the phenomenon where one is perhaps antinomically happening to oneself rather than simply happening, this collapse in a way reminiscent of how a black hole is created, which is as the result of a star's core finally being overwhelmed by its own gravity, at times so fast the outer layers are blasted out of existence, leaving only something like a burned peach pit, or a naked body in a fetal position, not because it has just been born, but quite the opposite. Zero volume and infinite density, quite the opposite. I will not assume whether you understand anything that I am saying here. I will not assume whether you believe I am somebody worth understanding. As such, I could go on about whether or not I believe you cared or care about me as a person or as a friend or as a writer or a woman or a girl or a body or as a collection of body parts or as a curation of usable body parts or as a singular usable body part. But I'm not sure what point that would hold or prove in the definitive. Sometimes I think you have hated me since the moment I first turned you down in February, perhaps even before, since the first moment I did not laugh at your first joke or did something that made you feel judged. By this I mean seen rather than admired, or like you were not writing the story here, writing my lines in them in a way I would follow along with as instructed. But Jack, I'm a very loyal girl or woman or person or friend or writer, and although I did not give you everything you wanted as you wanted it, so instead you just took it, I wonder if you know that I would have given you so much. I would have given you so much for as long as we even vaguely knew each other. I would have gone to your book launches and read your typewritten poetry and held the door at your events and bought you and your wife flowers if you ever got married and I was still in your life. I would have seen you in a suit, clean shaven and groomed, and told you how you looked handsome, and I was so happy for the two of you. Or maybe we would have drifted out of each other's orbit indefinitely, and I would see a picture of it or hear of it from an acquaintance and wish you well in my head or in a letter that I would write instead of this one. And I would have wanted you to tell me about Wisconsin and love and basketball or whatever you wanted to talk about, really, and I would have continued to read the novel It Seems You're Never Quite Done Drafting, and it would have been good and easy, real fucking good and easy. And you have not taught me anything or challenged me or overpowered me in a way that matters. Instead, you have confirmed to me what I have spent my life and writing trying to disprove, which is that so often poetry is a farce, and poets especially, and that my care for the both is the overgrown mistake of a child, which builds things up to and after they spoiled in a way I will never move past so long as I'm in this world. I terribly miss the version of you who I had began to find friendship in earlier that night in June, whose advice I felt I could listen to, who told me could always tell what was going through my mind in a given moment, how now you're confused, and now you're smiling, and now you're trying not to giggle, and now you're giggling. I think we could have had a real nice time. And I would have forgiven you for any clumsiness or what I allowed to be read as clumsiness in the past. And it would have been summer. And if I learned how to drive, maybe I would have asked you for car advice or built up the courage to ask if maybe you would take me along with your other friends on a road trip sometime. And if you found me too annoying for that, that would have been okay. We could have stayed at a distance and shared a cigarette once in a while and been acquaintances and alright with each other. When you say what happened brought us closer than we would have ever been otherwise, I cannot help but feel like so much of that closeness is anti-closeness, is negative space, is the knowledge of a facetious intimacy, but in the former term of that phrase, of all that could have been in lightness and cared, and is now mutated and perhaps soiled, and perhaps forever so. In early April, in the middle of some particularly long and strenuous Substack, I wrote the following about you. You leave the apartment after the sun has risen, and after a friend, acquaintance person has tried to push you down on a bed twice, fortunately not too strong, you telling him to chill, stop. You do not want an angry man at the afters. You know, the way to not turn men into angry men is to give them what they want, but what they want seems itself riddled with it. Balancing act 0-something. You don't know. You don't even know whose house this is. You're trying to build your own place, and there is enough to balance in it already. You walk this girl to the apartment she shares with like 4 roommates, and outside of it tell this friend, acquaintance person that you are not going to sleep with him. Won't fall for the just sleep on my couch this time, because in spite of everything he tells you, how much he says he just loves women, you know he does not listen when you speak. Has already started to despise you before even needing to touch you, and it's all downhill from here. You feel he's a man with a lot of anger or misplaced hurt or something working up inside of him, and you tell yourself that if you do not let him all the way into your house, he will not grow into another very angry man, and you will be able to cherish his presence, which you do cherish. Despite him writing violent things about you on the internet, you care about him, perhaps more than he does, and he probably does not know or believe that and doesn't matter. And in his apartment a few weeks before, you told him about how you felt overwhelmed with how much pain it seemed everyone was in all the time, always, how you had this instinct to give away anything that would soothe it, even if just for a moment, but knew it would end you if you did. You meant what you said, and does it matter? Much of this is still true. The care, the anger, the desire to make things less burdensome or abrasive or cruel because there was enough of that already. I want you to know I've tried to do this throughout the time we've known each other, before and after the rape. I hate calling it that as much as you do, but being afraid of language does not outdo the real it seeks to apprehend. What we cannot correctly articulate, we cannot exert agency over. Epistemology, intellectual exercises, like. But by now, Jack, it has become impossible to ignore that the issue is not purely, largely epistemological. This was the only joker I had in navigating this current quandary, and the ability even to call it a quandary through this allow hesitation to lend itself to grace. The last stunt in an increasingly wide-splitting, limb-tearing, self-cannibalizing, embodied intellectual exercise, and still, Jack, it has become impossible to ignore the reality of the events of the past months and the disposition you have had through them. I've tried very hard to make you understand why I'm trying to do what I've tried to do so in the least abrasive way possible, and still I have increasingly felt you believe yourself to be the one giving me patience, grace, favor, rather than the opposite. And Jack, as such, I cannot continue to plead for you to recognize something, the recognition of which would have led you to be the one asking me for this extension of time and empathy and understanding, rather than the reverse. And Jack, I can only ignore this reality for so long. And does it matter? And Jack, was there ever a point to you, however short and slight, yet true, where I mattered? And maybe in another life, these sentences end with question marks, but I seem in this one to be out of time.